Listen up, because tonight I'm telling you a story so powerful, it still makes my voice catch when I speak it. Out where the Dragoon Mountains stand guard over secrets older than any white man's map, where thunder speaks louder than the law and mercy rides a thin trail, two broken lives crossed paths in the middle of a deluge. A woman fleeing a killer wearing a badge, a warrior carrying ghosts heavier than any rifle, and a storm that decided they belonged together. It started with the tiniest betrayal, a parlor door left ajar just long enough for truth to slip through and change forever the course of two hearts. Before we chase this wildfire of a tale, drop a like if you're ready, and comment where you're sitting tonight. Montana Peaks, Texas Plains, or somewhere far across the water. This here's the tale of a gal who figured her days were all chalkboards and spelling bees, and a fighter who reckoned his battles were long done. It's about how real justice sometimes means walking clean off the edge of any map they've drawn for you. So shut your eyes tight, partners. Let's ride back. It's 1874, smack in the Arizona territory, way up in the jagged jaws of the Dragoon Mountains, and the whole world feels like it's drowning. This ain't no gentle shower. It's a roaring cloudburst, pounding the Red Canyon dirt into thick, greedy muck that grabs at your boots like quicksand. Lightning don't rumble. It snaps sharp as a bullwhip against the stone cliffs, rattling your bones. Right in the heart of that fury, a young woman flees for her life. Her name's Isolde Wren. 24 summers old, hair the shade of sun-bleached prairie grass, now soaked flat against her head by the downpour. She ain't geared for these heights. Got on a simple calico frock, hem ripped ragged, soaked heavy with clay that clings and pulls at her skirts like hungry hands. She ain't fleeing some grisly mountain lion or the Apache war bands the town gossips whisper about with wide eyes. No, she's running from the lawman himself, Sheriff Mordecai Voss. To the good folks of Copper Creek, he's the iron fist of order. But Isolde's seen the ugly truth. Just 2 hours back, peeking through a cracked parlor door, she watched Voss plant a slug square in the chest of Judge Peregrine Holt. She seen him calmly wipe crimson off his fingers with a fancy silk kerchief, then snatch the motive for the killing. A worn leather pouch holding the land grant proving the town's mineral claims belong to the hard-working miners, not to that badge-wearing crook. She clutched that pouch tight against her ribs now, guarding it from the rain like it was her own babe. Her lungs scorched with every pull of air, her heart slammed wild against her ribs, a caged thing desperate to break free. Each inhale came ragged and wet and freezing. She could hear the pursuit closing. Not right on her heels, but near enough. Heavy horse hooves sucking through the mire. Men's voices hollering, "Find her!" Then Voss's low growl sliced through the storm roar, deep, gravel rough, cold as a grave. "She's just a schoolmarm, boys. She won't make it an hour in this hell." Isolde clawed her way up a slippery bank, boots skidding. She grabbed at mesquite roots, hauling herself higher, frantic for the high pine country where no horse could chase. But the mountain showed no mercy. Her foot hit loose shale. It shifted. She bit back any cry. She knew noise meant death, but a sharp gasp ripped out as she slid back down, her ankle wrenched with a wet crack. White-hot fire exploded up her leg, blinding her a heartbeat. She tumbled into the muck, slamming hard against a boulder. She lay gasping, teeth sunk into her lip till blood welled, refusing to scream. The ankle throbbed like a live wire. She tried rising. The leg folded under her. Down in the canyon, the horses halted. "I hear ya, schoolmarm," Voss's voice floated up, echoing off the walls. Calm, deadly calm. "You got what's mine. Step out now. The wild'll finish you slower than my bullet, and a damn sight meaner." Isolde dragged herself through the slime. No surrender. Not after what Voss did to problems he wanted gone. Then she spotted it. A narrow crack in the cliff. A shallow cave mouth half choked by thick creosote. It was poor shelter, just a gouge in the rock. But it was dry. Hidden. She crawled in, bad leg trailing useless. Inside, the air hung cold, thick with wet dirt, bat droppings, and a faint, sharp trace of smoke and sagebrush. She jammed her back to the stone wall, hugging the pouch, forcing slow breaths. In. Out. Quiet. She squeezed her eyes shut, ears straining for the squish of boots nearing the bank below. "Please," she begged, silent. "Let him ride past." Lightning cracked, blue-white glare flooding the cave. In that instant, Isolde's heart froze. She wasn't alone. Back in the gloom, cross-legged on a stone shelf, sat a man, staring straight at her. He didn't twitch, didn't blink, still as the mountain. He was Apache. Long black hair like a raven's wing, bound with rawhide. Face all hard plains and bronzed skin, rain-streaked. Simple buckskin shirt and leggings, moving quiet as a shadow. In his hands, a chunk of black obsidian glass and a piece of antler. Scratch. Scratch. He was carefully napping the razor edge onto a blade, each precise tap echoing soft in the dimness. Isolde's breath snagged hard in her chest. All those ugly tales she'd overheard back in town, tales of bloodthirsty savages, merciless killers prowling these ridges, swarmed her thoughts like hornets. She'd bolted from one predator only to stumble straight into the jaws of another. Her lips parted. A raw scream clawed its way up her throat, born of pure, bone-deep terror. But the man didn't spring. He didn't lift the knife. He just held her gaze. Those eyes, dark as midnight canyons, endless and steady, carried none of the cold malice she'd glimpsed in Sheriff Mordecai Voss. No, these weren't a murderer's eyes. They belonged to a man weighing souls. This was Varek, 29 hard years old, a warrior who'd turned his back on the reservation, sworn to watch over these mountains. For too long he'd seen white men carve up the land like it was theirs to gut. And he knew Voss's voice all too well, the same gravel rasp that had commanded his brother Nayati's death 3 winters past. Varek had shadowed the sheriff for days, biding time for the perfect storm. Now this soaked white woman in a shredded dress, reeking of panic and rainwater, had crawled right into his trap. The noise outside swelled. "Check the ridge," one deputy hollered. "I seen tracks sliding this way." Isolde scrambled back, eyes flicking wild between the cave mouth and the shadowed warrior. She was cornered, caught between a killer wearing a tin star and a fighter gripping obsidian. Boots crunched gravel right outside, seconds from discovery. Panic seized her. She sucked in air to scream, to plead, to do anything at all. Varek moved. Faster than thought. One heartbeat he was perched on the ledge. The next he was right beside her. He didn't hit her. That big, work-hardened hand clamped firm over her mouth. The touch jolted like lightning. His palm felt warm, rough against her icy skin. He carried the scent of rain-soaked pine, old leather and earth. Terrifying, yet somehow steadying. He eased her back flat against the cold wall. His other hand lifted, a single finger to his own lips. Quiet. His face hovered inches from hers. She caught the faint gold sparks in those deep eyes. No hate there, only fierce focus. He was tuned to every sound beyond the entrance. Isolde went rigid, the scream withered in her throat. A shock hit her deep. He wasn't capturing her. He was shielding her. Right at the brush line, the deputy muttered, "Sheriff, reckon there's a pocket in here." Varek's eyes narrowed to slits. He eased his hand off her mouth, but kept it hovering close. A clear warning. He scooped a loose stone from the floor, turned toward the narrow fissure at the cave's rear. Then he let loose a sound no human throat should make, a low, rumbling growl that climbed into a spine-chilling, furious shriek. Perfect imitation of a cornered cougar defending its lair. The noise bounced off the walls, swelling huge and vicious. Outside, a horse shrieked in blind panic. "Cougar!" the deputy yelled, staggering back. "Big bastard! Spooked the whole string!" "Get those damn horses under control, you fool!" Voss bellowed. But the damage was done. Hooves thundered away down the slick trail as terrified mounts bolted. The deputy cursed and hollered, chasing after them. "Let it go!" Voss roared after them, voice already thinning in the storm. "She won't last the night with a cat in this cold. We'll drag her carcass out come daylight when the rain quits." The posse's racket faded, swallowed by the wind and thunder. Inside the cave, silence settled. Thick, heavy as wet wool. Varric lowered his hand slow. Isolde sagged against the stone, heart pounding so fierce she figured it'd leave bruises. She lifted her eyes to him. This stranger, this so-called savage who'd just pulled her from death's grip, stared down, face a mask nothing could read. He slid the obsidian blade back into its sheath at his belt. For the first time, Isolde truly studied him. She saw the coiled tension in his broad shoulders, the sharp watchfulness of a man who'd spent his life with a target on his back. It struck her then. To Voss and his kind, they were the same. Pests, problems to erase. Varric rose smooth. He stepped to the cave lip, peering into the driving rain, making damn sure the riders were gone for good. Only then did he turn back to her. He studied her swollen ankle, already puffed up ugly purple against her pale skin. His gaze shifted to the leather pouch she gripped, like it was her last lifeline. Then he reached out a hand toward her. A silent offer. Isolde froze. Everything she'd grown up believing, the schoolroom order, the strict Sunday sermons, the rules that kept folks in line, screamed at her to bolt. This man was supposed to be the enemy, the savage from every fireside warning. But the so-called civilized world had just sent a bullet chasing her spine. And this stranger? He'd given her the gift of quiet when death was breathing down her neck. She hesitated only a heartbeat longer, then stretched out and clasped his hand. His grip was like forged iron, steady, unyielding, lifting her despite the fire in her leg. He spoke for the first time. His English came slow, thick with accent, deep as river stones rolling under current. "Storm covers our trail," he murmured, "but it covers theirs, too." His dark eyes locked on hers, challenging, searching. "You can stay put right here. Wait for the chill to sink in. Wait for the big cat. Wait for the man with the badge to circle back and end it clean. Stay and die." He nodded toward a tight, hidden scramble up the back chimney of rock, a trail so narrow and steep only mountain goats or spirits could claim it. "Or," he said simply, "you move." Isolde glanced at the pounding rain, at the pouch holding the one scrap of truth she still owned. Then she looked straight at Varric. In that instant, she understood. He was the only real shield she had left against the monsters hiding behind tin stars. "I can't walk," she whispered, voice shaking like aspen leaves. Varric gave no reply. He simply turned, dropped low, and offered his broad back. In that single breath, Isolde chose. She turned her back forever on the life she'd known. She leaned in, arms wrapping tight around the warrior's shoulders. Together they melted into the roaring storm. The mountain didn't roll out any welcome. It threw down a gauntlet. As they climbed out of the canyon's muddy bottom, the ground reared up steep, slick granite walls laced with tearing thorn brush. The very tempest that had hidden their escape now lashed at them like it took the chase personal. Wind screamed through the dragoons, keening through every crack in the stone like a legion of restless spirits. Isolde fought to climb. Teeth clenched, fingers clawing wet roots and sharp edges, hauling her ruined leg behind like dead weight. But the pain lived inside her, a blazing spike stabbing upward with every inch gained. Her good foot slipped on wet shale. For one gut-twisting second, she teetered backward, plunging toward the storm's black maw. But she didn't fall. A hand locked around her arm, not wild or desperate, iron steady. Varek didn't just brace her. He met her eyes through the streaming rain, reading every flicker of agony, every ounce of exhaustion, every sign she had nothing left. No words, no asking. He simply shifted, bent, and lifted her clean off the ground into his arms. For a woman raised where touch was corseted tight by rules and stiff propriety, the feel of it stole her breath. She braced to feel awkward, heavy, a dead weight dragging him down on this killer path. But Varek never faltered. He rose smooth and sure, powerful as the mountain itself. He cradled her high against his chest, using his own body to cut the worst of the wind's bite. As he pressed on upward, Isolde felt the raw truth sink in. The men back in Copper Creek, they merely walked the earth. Varek moved as one with it. He found holds on sheer faces where no crack showed. He stepped across chasms that would have swallowed a horse and rider whole. Step by step, he carried her out of the dark canyon, climbing into the high sky islands, secret pockets of pine and oak drifting above the desert like forgotten dreams. Thin, biting air, a place posse horses could never reach. Pressed close, Isolde felt the deep, steady drum of his heart, slow and calm, a world apart from the storm's rage. Rain clung to him, sure, but underneath lay something older, the sharp bite of crushed sage, wood smoke, wet buckskin, the very scent of the land breathing. For the first time since she'd watched murder in that sheriff's parlor, the terror coiled in her chest began to ease. She wasn't just being carried. She was guarded. In the arms of what the town called a savage, she felt more secure than she ever had behind lace curtains and polite smiles. She let her head rest against his shoulder, eyes closing against the stinging rain, and gave herself over to his strength. They climbed on until the downpour softened to drifting mist, until the mist thickened into heavy, dripping quiet. At last they reached a high refuge, a natural alcove scooped into the cliff, guarded by a great red rock overhang. It was bone dry in that sheltered nook. Outside, the wind raged like a banshee, slamming useless against the unyielding rock. Varek eased her down gentle as could be onto a thick pallet of pine needles and old fir branches. He'd clearly laid it in days, maybe weeks earlier, ready for whatever the mountain threw his way. He wasted no time, moving straight to the alcove's rear. A quick strike of flint on steel, and in seconds a small, clean-burning fire popped to life. No smoke to give them away, just dancing orange glow painting the stone walls. The heat struck Isolde like a warm slap, chasing pins and needles back into her numb arms and legs. But heat brought pain roaring back, too. Her ankle pulsed hot and vicious. Varek dropped to one knee in front of her. He drew the knife from his belt, not a threat, just utility, and sliced clean through the sodden laces of her wrecked boots. He peeled the soaked leather away, slow and careful, like coaxing a hurt sparrow from a trap. Isolde hissed through clenched teeth, flinching. Her ankle had ballooned to grapefruit size, skin pulled drum-tight and furious blue-black. She braced for the rough yank, the bone-setting grind the town doc always delivered, the kind of fix that hurt worse than the break itself. But Varek reached instead for a small buckskin pouch tied at his waist. He tipped dried leaves and roots into a stone bowl, splashed in water from his canteen. He started grinding, slow, steady scrape that filled the little space like a heartbeat. "What is that?" Isolde whispered, voice raw and scratchy. "Glod malo," he answered low, the words vibrating soft in the cave. "And sage. For the swelling. For the spirit." He scooped the cool green mash onto his fingers and smoothed it over her skin. First it chilled, then settled into a soothing miracle. He didn't just smear it. He worked it in deep, thumbs circling, easing the tightness from her calf, coaxing fluid away from the angry joint. Those hands were hard, scarred from a lifetime of hard living, yet his touch stayed impossibly tender. As he worked, quiet stretched thick between them, loaded with everything unsaid. Isolde kept a death grip on the leather pouch still resting in her lap, the last scrap of her old world. "You haven't asked," she said quiet, watching firelight flicker sharp across his high cheekbones. Varek didn't lift his eyes from her ankle. "Storm don't ask the tree why it fell, it just blows." "It's a land deed," she pressed, needing to explain, to prove she wasn't dead weight. "Federal paper. Proves the Copper Creek claims belong to the miners' families, not to Sheriff Voss. He killed a judge for it. I took it." She waited, braced for anger, greed, anything. Varek paused his massage. His gaze rose, dark eyes locking onto hers. He glanced at the pouch with a quick flash of contempt. "Paper," he said flat. "It's proof," Isolde shot back, her old schoolmarm tone creeping in despite everything. "It's the law." "Paper means nothing," Varek answered. He wiped his hands on a scrap of cloth. "White men scratch lines on paper. Say, this is mine, that is yours. But the mountain knows no lines. Rivers run right over 'em. Wolves pay 'em no mind. Land belongs to the wind." "Justice matters," she argued, fingers tightening on the bag. "Without this, he wins. He keeps killing. This paper's the only way to stop him." Varek settled back on his heels, forearms resting easy on his knees. He looked at her then, deep, bone-weary sorrow in his eyes. "Justice," he repeated, tasting the word like strange coin. "White men tell that story to cover their crimes. They write justice on paper, then burn villages, write law, then starve whole peoples. Your paper won't stop a bullet, schoolteacher, won't stop a man like Voss." Isolde went quiet. She wanted to push back, to defend the world she'd come from. But her eyes caught the old scar slicing across his shoulder. Firelight danced in the hidden cave. And she remembered Voss wiping blood off his hands with that fancy silk kerchief. She understood then. Varek wasn't cynical. He was speaking from scars. The storm howled on for 3 full days. Outside, nothing but gray sheets of sleet and screaming wind. But inside the alcove, time seemed to hold its breath, curling slow like smoke from their little fire. It became days of quiet watching, a gentle, unspoken change settling between them like dust after rain. Isolde couldn't walk, but she flat refused to sit idle. She studied Varek, watched how he moved, never wasted emotion, everything deliberate. He mended his gear with patient stitches, cooked plain meals of jerked venison and trail bread, kept the fire alive on the smallest scraps of wood. On the second day, while he stood near the entrance, scanning the valley far below, Isolde reached for the obsidian knife he'd left by the flames. It felt heavy in her hand, perfectly balanced. She'd never touched a weapon before. Her fingers knew ink stains, not blood, but she remembered the helpless terror when Voss's deputies were right outside the cave. She swore she'd never feel that powerless again. She picked up a scrap of driftwood. She started carving, trying hard to copy the smooth, sure strokes she'd watched him use. Her hands were clumsy, uncertain. The blade skidded sideways, nearly kissing her thumb. She froze solid. She waited for the sharp reprimand, for him to snatch the knife away and bark, "Put that down. That's no tool for a lady." That's exactly what the men back in Copper Creek would have done. Varek turned. He saw the obsidian knife in her grip. He saw the rough, crooked shavings scattered on the cave floor. He crossed the small space without hurry. He didn't grab the blade. Instead, he sank down beside her on one knee. "Not like that," he said, voice low and gentle. He reached out, wrapping his big, calloused hand over hers. Slowly, he guided her wrist, tilting the blade to a better angle against the wood. "Always push away from your heart," he told her quietly. "Let the stone do the cutting. Don't fight the grain. Listen to it." He lingered there a long moment, his hand steady over hers. The closeness of the lesson cut deeper than any edge. He wasn't treating her like some delicate flower. He saw her as a survivor, hungry to learn a whole new way of living. And Isolde watched him right back. She saw the deep patience shining in his eyes. She understood then. His wisdom didn't come from pages in a book. It was carved into the scars on his hands. It lived in the long, listening silence of the high country. And she found herself aching for that kind of knowing. On the third night, the storm finally broke. The wind fell away, leaving behind a stillness so deep it rang in their ears like a struck bell. They sat close to the fire, sharing a simple supper of venison broth warmed from dried strips. The immediate danger had passed. By now, Voss would figure her dead and gone, swallowed by mud and the mountain. But the quiet carried its own kind of risk. "You live like a ghost," Isolde said softly, staring into the glowing coals. "Why stay out here all alone? Why not with your people?" Varek went quiet for a long stretch. He turned the strip of jerky slowly between his fingers. "My people are penned in," he said at last, the words heavy with old anger. "San Carlos. They call it Hell's 40 acres. No trees, no game, just dust and whatever scraps the government agent decides to toss out." He stared into the flames, firelight dancing in his dark eyes. "I wouldn't go. My brother, Nayati Voss, killed him. For hunting meat to feed his family, hunting outside the lines they drew. When I asked for justice, the law called my brother a thief." He lifted his gaze to meet hers. For the first time, Isolde saw the crack in his iron armor, the raw, aching loneliness of a man who had chosen honor over safety, and paid for it with years of solitude. "I guard a mountain that's already been sold off," he said. "I'm chief of nothing but the wind. I have no people, no fire, except this one." A sharp sting rose behind Isolde's eyes. Without thinking, she reached across the small space between them. Her hand settled over his. His skin felt warm, solid. He went perfectly still, staring down at her pale fingers resting on his dark, weathered ones. It was a bridge thrown across a chasm the world insisted could never be crossed. "You're not alone," Isolde whispered. The truth of it surprised her as much as him. "I don't have a people either, Varek. All I had were books, a schoolroom full of children who weren't mine, and a piece of paper that said I was right up until I nearly died in the mud clutching it." She tightened her hold on his hand. "You saved me. You have a fire right here, and tonight, you're sharing it." Varek slowly turned his hand over, his strong fingers laced through hers. It wasn't a kiss. It was something deeper, far more dangerous. A quiet, unbreakable recognition. In that small, high cave, with the first stars finally piercing the thinning clouds outside, the wall between them shattered. Isolde understood with piercing clarity. The world she'd fled, the world of sheriffs, judges, and land papers, was the truly savage place. Cold, cruel, built on deals and betrayal. But here, sitting on hard dirt beside a man the town called a beast, she found real honor, real gentleness. A man who had carried her up a mountain, not because he claimed her, but because her life mattered. The so-called savage was the noblest soul she'd ever known, and the lawman was the monster. As the fire snapped and popped, two lonely hearts, both cast out by the worlds that raised them, sat hand in hand, finally seeing the truth. That maybe, just maybe, they'd finally stumbled onto a real home. Peace, friends, is a brittle thing, especially when you've had to steal it from the jaws of the world. For 3 long days, that high alcove had been its own little kingdom, floating safe above the clouds like a secret only the eagles knew. But the ugly world down below always finds a way to claw its way back up. It started with a smell, not the clean bite of pine or the fresh, dusty scent of rain-soaked rock. No, this was sour, greasy, the stink of death riding the wind. Varric woke first. He didn't twitch a muscle, but Isolde felt the sudden steel ripple through his body where their arms touched. She opened her eyes and saw him standing rigid at the cave's edge, outlined black against a sky gone wrong. Dawn should have been soft blue and gold. Instead, it burned a sickly, bruised orange. Isolde limped to his side, her ankle now wrapped tight in leather strips, holding steady. She peered down into the canyon they'd fought so hard to escape. Ice flooded her veins. Sheriff Mordecai Voss hadn't come to track them quiet-like. He'd come to burn them out. Below, the brush was roaring with fire. Thick black smoke twisted up the canyon walls like poisonous serpents, strangling the air and hiding every trail. Voss wasn't hunting. He was conquering. Didn't give a damn about the land, the deer, the ancient trees. All he wanted was bodies. "He pushes us higher," Varric said, voice flat as hammered iron. "Fire eats the breathable air. Stay put and we choke. Climb too far and we're pinned against the peak with nowhere left." He spun to face her, eyes hard and urgent, his hands clamped onto her shoulders, firm, unyielding. "Listen close. There's a goat trail on the north face. Steep as sin, deadly if you slip, but the smoke drifts the other way. You can slide down the scree slope. It dumps into the river basin. Go." Isolde shook her head. "No." Varric's jaw tightened. "Voss has men posted on the ridge. Someone's got to pull their eyes. Someone's got to make noise." There it was again. That same damn noble streak. The warrior stepping between the helpless and the wolf, ready to die alone against a dozen rifles and a wall of flame. He was trying to send her away to live. Isolde looked at the rising smoke, at the leather pouch tucked in the corner, then at the man who'd washed her wounds, taught her to hold a knife, carried her through hell. Fear? Sure, it was there, cold and sharp, but underneath it something new had been hammered out over these 3 days, a backbone of pure steel she never knew she had. She stepped back out of his grip, not running, but standing her ground. "No," she said again, voice steady as rock. Varric blinked, caught off guard. "Isolde, you'll die here." "Maybe," she answered, "but I'm through running." "Varric, I ran from the schoolhouse, ran from the town, ran straight into that storm. If I run now, I'll spend the rest of my days looking over my shoulder till the day I drop." She bent and picked up the obsidian knife he'd given her. She hefted it, feeling its perfect balance, just like he'd taught. "You said the land belongs to the wind," she told him, eyes locked on his. "Well, I ain't the wind. I'm the storm, and I'm not leaving you behind." Varric stared, really stared. He saw the faint tremble in her fingers, but he also saw the blaze in her eyes, hotter than the canyon inferno below. He saw a woman who'd chosen her trail, A slow, fierce smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Respect, pure and hard-won. Partnership. "Then we don't run," he said, drawing his own knife with a soft, metallic whisper. "We fight. Back to back." They didn't flee the danger. They walked straight into its heart. They headed for the crumbling ruins of the old Dutchman's claim, an abandoned sluice box perched precarious on a rock ledge right at the canyon's lip. Years ago, white prospectors had scarred the mountain here, leaving behind rotting wooden trestles, rusted iron wheels, heaps of worthless tailings, a graveyard of pure greed, and the perfect spot for an ambush. Smoke hung thick now, burning their eyes, bleeding the sunlight red. They could hear the posse below, coughing, yelling, whipping horses up the twisting switchbacks. "Spread out!" Voss's voice thundered through the fire's crackle. "They're up at the mine! Bring the girl to me alive! The Apache? Kill him dead! He's meat!" Varric ghosted between the decaying timbers like smoke himself. No rifle for him, just his bow, his knife, and the mountain he knew better than any man alive. He wedged a huge boulder behind a rotting support post, kicked loose gravel across a stretch of treacherous shale. He was turning the very ground into a loaded gun. Isolde crouched low behind the rusted ore cart, its iron sides pitted and flaking. Her heart slammed against her ribs like a wild mustang in a corral, but her head stayed cool and sharp. She gripped the heavy Colt revolver Varric had pressed into her palm earlier, a battered piece lifted off some long-gone soldier. It felt strange and heavy and icy in her hands. 6 rounds. Varric materialized beside her for a heartbeat, voice a bare whisper. "Make everyone count, but save the last." He didn't explain why. He didn't need to. "I won't need it," she whispered right back. Then the shadows shifted. One of Voss's deputies stepped out of the thick smoke, rifle already shouldered. He planted his boot right on the loose shale Varric had loosened. The ground betrayed him. With a startled yell, the man went sliding hard down the slope, rifle bucking wild, spitting bullets useless into the sky. Hell broke loose. Bullets whined off the ore cart's iron, kicking up stinging sprays of rust right into Isolde's face. She didn't blink. She rose just enough to aim over the rim, leveled the big pistol, and squeezed. The kick slammed her shoulder hard, but the slug punched wood inches from another deputy's ear. He dove for cover like a scalded cat. She wasn't some sharpshooter. Didn't have to be. All she needed was noise, loud, steady noise to pull their attention. While Isolde kept them ducking, Varric struck. He kicked free the wedged support beam. A massive boulder groaned like it was alive, then thundered down the narrow trail, smashing straight into the line of deputies. Shouts turned to screams as men scattered, formation shattered like dry kindling. Varric ghosted through the choking smoke. An arrow hissed from his bow, nailing a man's sleeve to a pine trunk. Another shaft buried deep in a deputy's thigh. He was a shadow, everywhere at once, and gone the next. Pure vengeance wrapped in smoke. But Sheriff Mordecai Voss wasn't the kind to scare easy. The man was built like a freight bull. He didn't duck or dodge. He charged straight through the falling rock and dust, long duster coat whipping behind him like dark wings. His eyes locked on the ore cart. On Isolde. "Give it up," Voss bellowed, working the lever on his Winchester as he advanced, shots cracking sharp. "Time's run out, schoolmarm." Varric burst from the shadows to cut him off, but 3 deputies swung their rifles his way, pouring lead into his cover. Splinters exploded around the warrior's head like angry hornets. He was pinned. Couldn't break free. Voss reached the ore cart. Isolde scrambled backward, but her boot snagged a rusted chain. She hit the gravel hard. Before she could swing the Colt up, Voss's boot lashed out and kicked the revolver spinning from her fingers. It clattered away into the smoke. He loomed over her, face blackened with soot and twisted with rage. He leveled the Winchester dead at her chest. "The deed," he snarled, free hand thrust out. "Hand over the satchel, girl. Maybe I make it quick." Isolde stared up at him. Past him she saw Varric, trapped, bullets chewing the timbers around him. Give Voss the pouch? He'd kill them both anyway. Fight him? Same end. She had to flip the board. She yanked the leather satchel off her shoulder. Voss's eyes tracked it. Hungry. Desperate. That paper was everything to him. Power, future, control. Isolde pushed to her feet, holding the bag out over the sheer drop into the blazing canyon below. "You want this?" she screamed, voice cracking raw with fury and fear. "You murdered a judge for it? You set the whole damn mountain on fire for it?" "Don't you dare," Voss growled, stepping closer. His rifle dipped just a fraction as his gaze fixed on the pouch. "Hand it over." "It's just paper," Isolde shouted. "That's what he told me, just paper." She locked eyes with Voss, and she let go. The satchel sailed out into empty air. For one frozen second, Voss watched his whole world tumble toward the flames. A guttural animal howl ripped from his throat. Pure, blind rage. Greed drowned out every scrap of sense. He dropped the Winchester and lunged, both hands clamping around Isolde's throat, fingers crushing like iron vices, ready to hurl her after the pouch. "You bitch!" he roared. But the distraction hit home. The moment Voss's attention shattered, Varric moved. Bullets from the deputies be damned. He exploded from cover, sprinting across open ground straight at the sheriff. A rifle cracked sharp from the ridge, one of Voss's deputies squeezing off a shot. Varric jerked hard as the bullet punched into his shoulder, spinning him like a rag doll. Bright blood sprayed across the rock. Isolde's scream tore out, strangled and raw, but Varric didn't drop. He rode the spin's force, bellowing through the pain and rage, and drove his body full force into Sheriff Mordecai Voss. The collision knocked Voss clear off Isolde. The two men, the lawman and the warrior, slammed into the dirt and rolled, locked together, tumbling straight toward the cliff's razor edge. It was a brutal, no-holds-barred fight for life. Voss was thick-built, powerful, driven by pure hate. Varric was bleeding bad from the shoulder wound, strength leaking fast. But something fiercer burned in him, something deeper than blood. Voss hammered a fist straight into the bullet hole. Varric grunted in agony but refused to release. His good arm snaked around Voss's thick neck like a noose. They rolled on, stones crumbling under them, tumbling closer to the drop. Loose rock rained into the smoke below. Voss's free hand darted to his boot and yanked out a bowie knife, long, wicked, gleaming mean in the firelight. "Die, you redskin bastard!" he shrieked, raising the blade high to drive it into Varric's chest. Varric caught the wrist in a desperate grip, but his hold was slipping. Blood poured too fast. The knife crept closer, closer. Isolde was on all fours, lungs burning for air. She saw the knife, saw Varric's face twisted in effort, sweat and blood mixing. His eyes met hers for one fleeting second, pure apology shining there. He was ready to die shielding her. Her fingers brushed cold steel in the dirt. The Colt Voss had kicked away. No more thoughts of proper ladies or schoolroom manners. No waiting for some hero to ride in. She snatched the heavy revolver up. Both hands wrapped tight around the grip to steady the shake. The weight felt like lead. The barrel wavered. Voss roared, breaking Varric's hold, rearing back for the final plunge of the knife. Isolde squeezed the trigger. The crack split the air louder than thunder. The bullet slammed square into Voss's chest. He froze mid-motion. The knife hung inches from Varek's heart. Shock wiped every trace of rage from his face. He stared down at Isolde, the schoolmarm he'd written off as easy prey, the woman he'd chased like a cornered rabbit. No last words, no curse. He just toppled backward. Momentum carried him over the cliff's lip. His body vanished into the swirling smoke below. A heavy silence crashed over the mountain. The deputies saw their boss fall, saw the sheer ferocity staring them down. Their rifles went quiet. They were hired hands, not fanatics. No Voss, no paycheck, no fight left. They wheeled their horses and bolted down the trail, leaving the burning canyon to burn. Isolde let the Colt drop. It clattered on stone. "Varek!" She scrambled over rocks, ignoring the fire in her ankle, ignoring tears blurring everything. He lay flat on his back near the edge, chest rising and falling hard. His shirt was soaked dark crimson. She dropped to her knees beside him. Hands hovered over the wound, afraid to touch, afraid she'd lost him already. "I'm here," she sobbed. "I'm right here." Varek's eyes fluttered open, clouded with pain, but still sharp. He glanced at the gun in the dirt, then at her. His good hand lifted slow. Bloody fingers brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek, gentle, full of quiet wonder. "You," he rasped, a wet cough breaking the word. "You didn't run." "I told you," she whispered, pressing her palm hard over his wound to slow the bleeding. "Back to back." He managed a smile, weak, pained, but real. "Back to back," he echoed. Sunlight sliced through the thinning smoke, painting long golden beams across the ruined claim. Voss was gone. The deed was gone. The old life was ashes. But as Isolde ripped strips from her dress hem to bind his wound tight, she felt it deep in her bones. For the first time ever, she stood on ground that wouldn't shift under her. She hadn't just lived through it. She'd fought. And she'd won. The canyon smoke began to lift, carried away on the same wind Varek had always honored. Gunfire had died. The deputies' shouts faded to nothing, replaced by the high, wild cries of hawks riding the rising thermals overhead. On the brink of the old Dutchman's ruined claim, the quiet hit harder than any gunshot. Isolde moved fast. Her hands, once marked by chalk dust and ink, were now slick with the blood of the man who'd pulled her from death's grip. She ripped long strips from the petticoats under her dress, wrapping them tight around Varek's shoulder to stop the bleeding. He sucked air through clenched teeth, jaw locked tight. Sweat beaded on his brow, rolling down his face. But he held still, never flinching away. He watched her the whole time, like a man witnessing something holy unfold right in front of him. "It went clean through," she whispered, voice trembling as she cinched the final knot. "Bone's not broken. You're gonna make it." Varek exhaled long and ragged. His shaking hand rose and covered hers. "Because of you," he rasped. Isolde sagged back against the rock, adrenaline finally crashing out of her like a spent storm. Her arms and legs felt heavy as iron bars. She glanced over the cliff's edge, down to the smoldering scrub where Sheriff Voss had vanished. And there it was. The leather satchel, snagged on a twisted branch of scrub oak maybe 10 feet below, dangling over nothing but fire and void. The strap had caught just right. It hadn't plunged into the flames. Isolde stared. That pouch held the deed, the evidence, the power to walk back into Copper Creek, face a judge, clear her name, and drag the whole rotten law into daylight. It was her way home. Her chance to be the hero the town would sing about. Varek tracked her gaze. He saw the bag. With a wince he pushed up, trying to sit. "I can get it," he croaked. "With rope, We pull your justice back up. He started to move, ready to risk everything one more time for her scrap of paper. But Isolde pressed a firm hand to his chest. No, she said. She rose. She spotted a long, broken timber from the old mining works. She carried it to the edge. Varek watched, brow furrowed in confusion. Isolde? It's the law, he said. It's your life. She leaned out, hooked the strap with the branch, and pulled slow and steady, hand over hand, until the satchel rested safe on the ledge beside them. She opened it. The deed lay inside, crisp and clean, untouched by smoke or blood. She stared at the paper. It promised land. Rights, a spot back in polite society. Then she looked at Varek, the warrior who belonged to the wind, the man with no room in that world of fences and courtrooms. If she dragged him back, he'd be hunted, locked up, or hanged, and she'd be the prim schoolteacher again. No place for the two of them together. Right then she knew. Real justice wasn't ink on paper. Real justice was freedom. Isolde walked to the small fire still glowing in the mine ruins. "What are you doing?" Varek asked, voice low and rough. "The sheriff's dead," she answered, stronger and clearer than she'd ever sounded. "And Isolde Wren, the schoolteacher? She died in that storm 3 days back. That's what folks will believe. That's what I want them to believe." She held the deed over the embers. "Isolde." "No," Varek warned, struggling to rise. "You can't throw away your life." "My world ain't gentle," he said. "Hard winters, empty stomachs, always moving, always watching your back." He was giving her an escape, offering her the chance to walk away, back to safety, because he cared enough to let her go. Isolde didn't waver. She dropped the deed into the flames. They watched it curl, brown, blacken. The ink, the lines men drew to chain the land, vanished in wisps of gray smoke. "I don't want gentle," she said, turning to him. She knelt close, cupping his face in her hands, uncaring of the blood and grime. "A life without you is just dying slow. Joyce. I choose the cold. I choose the wind. I choose you." Varek searched her eyes for any flicker of doubt. Finding none, he leaned into her touch, resting his forehead against hers. "Then you're not Isolde of the town anymore," he whispered. "You're the woman who walks with the storm. You're my heart." As the last scrap of paper crumbled to ash, the invisible chains tying them to the world below snapped for good. They were free at last. Seasons rolled on like wagons across the plains. Snow fell thick, then melted into rushing creeks. Wildflowers burst open across the meadows, faded, and bloomed again. 5 full years gone by. Picture this, if you will, a narrow valley tucked away in the hidden creases of the Dragoon Mountains, so well concealed no wagon road or trail ever finds it. A lush green pocket of heaven, watered by a spring that never quits running. A cabin stands there, not some gloomy cave, but a sturdy home raised from hand-split logs and smooth river rock. Lazy smoke drifts from the stone chimney, carrying the warm scent of sage and slow-cooking meals. Out front, a woman hangs bundles of drying herbs on a wooden rack. Her hair's grown long now, loose and untamed, threaded with silver and sun gold. Her skin's tanned deep from years under open sky. Her hands look strong, capable, marked by honest work. She pauses, head lifting as bright laughter rings across the meadow. Down by the creek stands a man, older now, carrying a few more scars, but still moving with that same liquid grace of a cougar on the prowl. He's got a little boy perched high on his shoulders, maybe 4 years old. The child has his father's deep, dark eyes and his mother's easy smile. Varek points upward at a red-tailed hawk wheeling lazy circles on the thermals. He's teaching the boy the old names for the wind in a tongue the rest of the world has tried hard to bury. Isolde watches them both. Her fingers brush the obsidian knife still hanging at her belt. A tool, a weapon, a quiet reminder of the day everything changed. She doesn't miss the chalk dust on her fingers, doesn't miss the tight corset squeezing her ribs, doesn't miss the so-called law that tried to kill her. She looks at her family, at the life they built from raw wilderness with their own hands. And she knows, bone deep, she's the wealthiest woman alive. We spend too many years clinging to the things we think make us who we are. Titles, land claims, the nod of approval from folks who don't know us. We grip our little leather satchels tight, scared to death of letting go, convinced that without them, we're nobody. But Isolde learned the mountain's hardest truth. Real truth ain't found in any courthouse. Real safety ain't hiding behind fences and locked doors. Sometimes, to find who you really are, you gotta let the world think you're gone for good. You gotta step clean off the map they've drawn. You gotta burn the deed to the life you thought you wanted, so you can finally live the one you were born for. Because in the end, the only land worth claiming is the territory of the human heart. My friends, thank you for riding this trail with me today. It's a story that reminds us courage usually looks a lot like breaking the rules. And home? Home ain't hardly ever a place, it's a person. Now I got a question for you, and I want the honest truth. If you believe love is the only law worth following, drop it in the comments below. What's one rule you broke for love? Did you step over a line? Did you walk away from a whole life? I read every single one of those stories you share. They light a fire in me more than you know. And before you ride off, tell me, where in the world are you tuning in from tonight? From the snowy ridges of Montana to the crowded sidewalks of New York, or maybe somewhere clear across the ocean? Drop your spot in the comments. I love seeing how wide our campfire circle stretches. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. We appreciate you more than you think. If this tale stirred something deep inside, we invite you to remain part of this frontier of memories. More true stories of honor, compassion, and destiny are waiting for you here. Subscribe, share, comment, and thank you for riding with us today. Aviso legal barra disclaimer. Our content is designed for artistic and entertainment purposes and may reinterpret historical themes using fictional touches. We apply AI tools thoughtfully, only to support production, while keeping human supervision over editing, emotional tone, and narrative coherence. We always comply with regulatory guidelines for AI-based media and avoid deepfake practices or identity manipulation. All supporting components remain legally sourced. Please ask for authorization before sharing or adapting any segment. Your respect makes it possible for us to continue telling meaningful stories.